Hello, good afternoon, ladybugs and yellow jackets. Although I feel like maybe I should start this segment with bookworms from now on because we always do authors. Welcome to this Friday's episode of Author Reads here on Fae Productions. I'm your host, Fairy Princess Lolly. And before I jump into the show today, I will get our obligatory things out of the way, which are first, please like and subscribe and ring the bell if you will. It helps everybody out to do that. Second is it is the last day for you to sign up for our IMBOLC candle exchange. And yep, you have a few more hours actually. And then at the end of the day today, I'll be sending everybody's partners out and all of the vendor lists of vendors to shop with. So it's $10 and under, including shipping. And we are doing a candle exchange. And then on February 2nd, we will be hosting a live stream where we have a bunch of things planned for IMBOLC. So if you would like to be in on that, please, the link is down there going in the ticker. And it's also in the low bar of everywhere that you should be watching from, except perhaps Twitch, because I don't think Twitch has a low bar. So it should be down there, though. You can find it pretty easily before, during, or after the show. And also a shout out to today's show sponsor, which is Spiritfire and Dew. And Spiritfire and Dew are the, excuse me, the whimsical polymer clay jewelry and creations of Kelly, who they are handmade by her, and she has custom options available. Her work is really quite beautiful based on just nature settings and all kinds of inspiration taken from around her. So if you would like to check out her work, you can find her at the website that is also going in the ticker. And please, if you do choose to shop there, just go ahead and let her know where you found her store, and that will be a good little bonus there. So with that said, thank you, Kelly / Spiritfire and Dew, for being our sponsor today. And Carmelo Rafala.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, is our author. Welcome to the show, Carmelo.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Please, if you will, introduce yourself to our audience. Tell us who you are, where you're from, shout outs to your people.
Excellent.
Yep.
There's too many shout outs. I'll keep it brief. Well, I'm from an immigrant family. I originally grew up in Connecticut, but strangely enough, my father coming from the old world. I'm now back in the old world, but I'm living in the UK. I've been here for 17 years.
Oh, wow.
But grew up in wonderful New England with all the beautiful autumn leaves. Wonderful place. It's great. Lots of like Edgar Allan Poe-ish kind of stuff going on there. I really love that whole like New England old colony vibe.
Right. Poe, Lovecraft, Stephen King is up there.
Yeah.
All kinds of that. My mom is up in Maine, so I've got a little experience going around that area as well. So, but whereabouts in the UK are you?
I'm on the south coast, not far from London, in a town called Brighton and Hove.
Oh, okay. All right. So, what have you brought for us today? Tell us a little bit about your writing and what you've got.
Well, primarily over the past few years, I've been writing short stories and getting them published in anthologies and so forth. Like, I'll do a little plug here. Why not? Like this bad boy, American Monsters Part 2.
Oh,
from
nice.
Fox Spirit Books, edited by Margaret Helgadottir from.
Is it American Monsters? Is it American Monsters like crazy psychopath people, or is it American Monsters like cryptozoology?
It's sort of like a bit of both of that.
Oh,
but there's always some sort of strange monster involved with it. It's a supernatural thing or element or something. There's a whole series of these books. They're wonderful coffee table-sized books. And I'm in Part 2. There's American Monsters Part 1. There's Eurasian Monsters. There's African Monsters. There's a whole bunch. They just put out a new one, which I think is going to be the last one. They've gone around the world.
Cool.
And so Margaret is a wonderful Margaret. If I murder her surname, I apologize, Margaret. Margaret Helgadottir from Norway. She's wonderful, wonderful, very professional, lovely lady. And her own book, The Stars Seem So Far Away, fantastic, one of my favorite. Pick it up. And so, yeah, I'm very proud to be in that. I was in stuff like this, stories for Chip, tribute to Samuel Delaney.
I'm trying to read all the little fine print at the bottom.
Yeah. Where's the camera? There we are.
There, yeah, there you go.
Edited by Nisi Shaw. This is a great book if you love Sam Delaney. There's some good tributes to him in here, some good stories and some good essays. And so I've been doing a bit of that. And then I've had, last year, on my birthday actually, in April, my novella came out from Guardbridge Books in Scotland. And it's a wonderful company, Guardbridge. They really do a lot of good things there. A lot of great authors there. In fact, I have to have a shout out to Gustavo Bondoni, who I think was on your show.
Yes.
Yeah, and he put me on to them because I'd shopped the novella around for a while and it wasn't having any luck. And I just sort of asked him, "Oh, I see you've had a few books out with Guardbridge. What are they like?" And so he told me that it was, that they were excellent, they were professional, they were very nice. And David Stokes, who owns and operates it, he said that this might be something to be interested in because it's sort of secondary world fantasy, sort of like it seems like our world, but it's not our world.
I was just going to ask. Well, I've never heard the term secondary world fantasy, and so I was wondering if you could just elaborate a little bit on what that means, because I'm probably not the only person ever out there. Like Douglas Adams says, right? You're not the last person to, not know the thing.
But the answer is 42. Yeah, secondary world fantasy is something it's usually a world that seems like our world, but is slightly different. In the terms of there may be. It may seem like an urban world, but there may be dragons. Or there may be fays, or there may be some sort of like magic, unexplained magic that lurks in the world. You can get a lot of good secondary world fantasies on Beneath Ceaseless Skies, which is an online magazine. They do primarily secondary world fantasies, so check them out. They're very good with that. And so. That's basically what that is, and as I was writing it, I didn't anticipate it coming out to be a secondary world fantasy. It just started to become that way because I was trying to steer clear of being hard science fiction because I'm not a scientist. So it just kind of turned into more of a fantasy world, and that sort of turned into a sort of a quasi-pirate kind of thing going on. And that's when Gustavo told me that David might be interested in it, and luckily enough, he was, and so. And
here you are, right?
Here we are.
Officially published and everything.
Yeah, well, my own at least, yes.
So, if you will, tell us a little bit then about the actual book we're going to hear from today. I know that you were trying to choose where you wanted to start, and so, if you're going to pick a particular passage, or if you're just going to start at the beginning, but if you could give us a little bit of the framework around what we're about to hear, that would be spectacular.
Okay, great. I'll try and do a brief background on the structure because the structure is quite strange for such a short book. I have a framing device where we have a narrator who comes in at the beginning, then comes in at the middle, and comes in at the end, and he's actually reading the story that you're reading.
Okay.
And there's a main narrative, then interspersed are eyewitness views to what happened, because the whole idea behind the story as it evolved came to be the idea of what is your story and how can you claim your story when other people claim it on your behalf and tell it. Sort of like two people seeing an accident, you're going to get slightly two different views. Mm-hmm. So how can you ever really claim your story when it's out there for other people to grab?
That is a very interesting concept, actually, kind of perception is reality sort of a thing.
Yeah, and as the narrator is searching for this person, who has he really discovered who she really is, and from what he's heard, is that it, or is that the truth? Is that somebody else's truth? So he's on his own quest to find out who she is, while the narrator is rather the main character, Dema, is on a quest of her own. So you also have that quest within a quest kind of theme. I'll probably pick up somewhere near the beginning, because if I go too far into the book, some of the reveals might come out, and I don't want to spoil it for anybody.
Okay, that sounds perfect. Just real quick before I let you get there.
Yeah, no.
For those of you watching at home that are just joining us, I am about to turn the screen over to Carmelo so he can read to us a little bit today from his book. While he is reading, I will be on mute in the background and in the comments with you guys. If you have questions and things you want to ask, comments, please put them into the comment section. And then when he's done, we will go ahead and pull your questions from the audience for him to answer. And of course, at the end of the show, we will have our classic giveaway as always. So with that said, are you ready, sir, to do the reading?
I am ready to do the reading.
All
Let
right.
us begin.
Here we go, and I'm going on mute.
Okay. We'll begin from chapter 2, from the main narrative by Rainier Eicher. With tattered sun sails, burned patches of hull, and blown electrics, they were forced to dock at the island realm of Tanpai, a small, isolated chain of islands as far from the Confederate archipelago as possible without passing the borders of known civilization. Despite the great distance between the island and the Confederacy, the port town of Honolulu was anything but the wretched dive she was expecting. The harbor was well kept and modern, the houses tall and straight, and it seems as though the spires behind them, rising out of the town center, were formed of some iridescent crystal. Dema Agon's bloodied and burned flesh did little to endear her to the crowd that gathered as they stepped off the gangplank. She noticed how Rima kept her brilliant yellow eyes fixed upon the cobbled walk, noticed how she seemed to quake ever so slightly. The sheen of Rima's dark hair, black as night, reflected the noonday sun in sparkles like crisp stars. At any other time, such a picture of beauty would have made Dema feel warm. Not now. Not with injuries, a crippled vessel, and the eyes of a foreign mob pressing in upon them. Dema's fingers tapped the grip of the gun sheathed on her thigh. It was time to act the part she had created for herself. You! She pointed at a boy in the crowd. What do they call you? Mistress Captain, he said, bowing respectfully, brown ponytail bobbing at the back of his head. I am called Selassie, a bard by trade. He bowed again. I have no need for a bard. Where is the dock officer? Mistress Captain, no one is expected at this mooring. The boy's eyes, gray like ash, shifted to Rima and lingered there. And with that, Dema noticed the mutterings, the sideways glances, as though Rima were a curiosity escaped from a circus. Something wrong, young Selassie? Apologies, Mistress Captain, the boy said, eyes locked on Rima. I mean no disrespect. We rarely see Jania in Tanpai. Dema pushed a finger into his shoulder. Look at me when I speak to you. Yes, Mistress Captain. Find the dock officer, she said. Tell him the scepter of night has arrived and graciously seeks the shelter of this harbor. Shelter? He echoed, mulling the word over. He spat over the side of the jetty. Protection will cost more. He stole a quick glance at Rima. Are you a quest captain? What I am is of no concern when the officer realizes what's out there. And what is out there? A path formed through the crowd. The officer appeared, clad in a long coat made of brown leather squares. A silver badge glinted from the breast. 3 armed guards followed. She bowed. Sir, I am Dema Agon, captain of the Scepter of Night. Under oath to the proprietor of the Confederate archipelago, it is my duty to report an attempted act of piracy. Black ships, someone muttered. The officer regarded her. The black ships of the Karasek have not plagued our waters since the regent declared Tanpai a neutral realm. You, on the other hand, land without flag, without permission, and on a mooring not scheduled for use today. It also appears, he looked her up and down, at the blood and burn sprawled across her exposed flesh, that you've narrowly escaped a purging of the great sea machines. Well, shelter is not easily forthcoming to novices who spin outlandish tales. Do not take me for a fool, she said. I spin no tales, and I am no novice. Novice or fool, they are much the same. He motioned to a guard who ran up the gangplank and disappeared into the ship's hold. I'm Officer Kirod, he continued, and you are far from the Confederacy. According to my charts, Dema said, that sea field to the north sits on the edge of your territory. Those Karasek ships may not enter into your waters, but they play fast and loose with the border. We don't often see Confederate ships out here. Why are you so far from your usual trade routes? Kira did not wait for a response. What is the condition of your vessel? 2 of our sun sails need replacing. The electronics board has short-circuited, and one of our 6 battery cells is completely burned out. Crew, 1 navigator lost at sea. And that's all, she said. He fixed her with a stony glare. It's unusual to travel without a bard, he said, especially if you're a quest captain. Are you? A quest captain? Before she could respond, the guard had returned from the scepter. He handed Kira a small item, one of the many trinkets Dema had fished from the waters around the sea machines. You will fill out a statement when you are fit enough, Mistress Captain, he said, studying the item. In the meantime, I'm impounding your ship. Fear rippled through her, but her poise remained authoritative, and her voice held the practiced tone of deliberate offense. I can pay the docking charge, and for the repairs to my ship. No, Mistress Captain, I don't think you can. If you allow me the privilege of accessing your markets, denied. Kira now eyed Rima as though for the first time. You see, we don't deal in machine artifacts, so we have no need for the services a Genea may offer. Kira pointed to the boy Selassie. You, get some men, confiscate any cargo aboard. The boy cast a nervous glance at Dema. Apologies, Mistress Captain, he said, pushed through the crowd, and ran down the dock. Dema wondered if her own nerves were showing. She threw her shoulders back. Does Tanpai's neutrality forsake the mariner's code of hospitality? You will be cared for, Kira held the piece up, and I will authorize repairs, but the cost, as well as the dock charge, will be considerable. Unless you can find a way to pay your debts, I will release your ship to anyone who can cover the expense. That is Tanpai law. Kira motioned to the guards. Disarm the captain and take her to medical. Dema knew arguing would be futile. Kira was doing his job, and misfortune had done hers. My ship, she said. I expect only skilled technicians will touch her. We have standards in the Confederacy. Kira raised an eyebrow. Undoubtedly. He placed both hands behind his back. Anything else? The crowd was still there, still muttering. Rima pushed into her, seeking assurance. Will she be safe? Dema said. Kira regarded Rima with cold indifference. It's not illegal for her to be here, he said, and then turned on his heel and disappeared into the crowd. Chapter 3. Here's an eyewitness account of Jan Cadaz, dockmaster of Soladin, port of Quiru, from the annals of Avram Ale. When her name first became known in the taverns of Quiru, Dema Egan was boatswain of the Wayfarer. Ship's captain, Tov Gaberik, put into port for crew replacements and electrical repairs. 1 man had been lost in a storm, 3 others shot down in a skirmish with black ships. The Wayfarer was a majestic vessel, boasting 3 grand masts, 9 sunsails, and flying the silver and maroon banners of the islands of Gish. Although her sides were riddled with bullet marks, the sheer elegance of her carved woodwork remained mostly unscathed. Her sweeping designs the work of master craftsmen found only among the peoples of those far islands. Dema could be seen on the foredeck as the mariners crowded the dock to watch the Wayfarer, that beauty of the seas, slide gracefully into the harbor, her pride still very much intact. The ship had been secured and dock charges paid. As standard practice, and in the interest of good relations with the fostering of trade, we stationed 2 guards at her berth to watch over the vessel. Gaberik issued leave for the rest of the crew as they would not be required until repairs had been completed. Dema had no intention of staying in Quiru, nor do I think she would have been welcome to do so. You see, she spent her first night in a holding cell. She had been charged with inciting violence in the Hope and Ruin tavern. Dema was certainly handy in a bar fight, and she proceeded to demonstrate her skills on more than one occasion until she was banned from 3 or 4 of our finest establishments. Ships had always been her home, she stated, since the age of 13, and while she enjoyed the warmth of soil and rock under her feet, the feeling was often short-lived. She would soon be itching to get back out upon the open water, where the rambling wind and driving current stirred her restless blood. And then she met Captain Malloy and his Genea woman. 4. We return to the main narrative by Rainier Eicher. They were given a room in a public house courtesy of the local authority. Not so much an inn as a sparsely furnished cell, Dema thought, a fit place for wayward mariners who posed a financial risk. She was treated by the harbor doctor, and then a guard took them to their room. He threw the keys on the table and departed, closing the door behind him. Rima sat on the edge of the bed, her frame silhouetted against the window. The room was painted in pastel hues by the dusty light of the waning day. Dema sank into the mattress like a collapsing sail. Dema signed, To sea we go. How long? I don't know, Dema vocalized. His scalded flesh soothed by a doctor's balms pulsed mildly beneath their dressings. Let's not lose our nerve, Dema signed back. The ship is safe at least. We'll get the scepter back. Ryma did not seem convinced. How will you do this? Although artifacts fallen from the stalks of the great sea machines fetched a good price, particularly those which induced visions or healed some ailment, they were contraband in Tanpai, and they had little else with which to barter. Tomorrow, Dema would have to go to the markets and buy food with what little coin they had. The authority were housing them, not feeding them. I'll score some work, Dema signed. Maybe as a dockhand. I can keep an eye on the scepter. If she goes out under new command, we can charter a ship or catch her up. Remember, Dema held up her palm. The scepter won't get far. I've stolen back that ship once before, if you recall, from that fool Lonergan. If needs be, I can steal it again. The look in Ryma's eyes spoke of uncertainty, an insecurity that for so long had characterized their lives together. The madness of the last 18 months gnawed at Dema's bones. However, there was some small consolation in the fact that she had put almost half a world between them and the islands of Quiru. She had to stay strong for Ryma's sake, for her own sake. They had been running too hard and for too long, and without result. The city of Anua and the safety Ryma believed it offered seemed no closer now than when they had first started out. And why should it? After all, Anua was a fabled place no one had ever seen. It was whimsy, a half-forgotten dream. But Dema was very much awake, and she had little time to entertain such folly. She was too busy keeping them alive. Dema also knew she could not allow herself to openly criticize Ryma's convictions too often. Dema was no stranger to confrontation, and was often the victim of her inability to control her belligerent nature. But she hated it when they fought. It unnerved her. It was much easier to allow Ryma to indulge in the comfort of her beliefs. The Janias were, after all, an unusual people. Mystical, nomadic, they were often thought of as sorcerers of a forgotten magic. This was particularly prevalent where the giant sea machines were concerned. As though driven by some peculiar affinity with the machines, Ryma, like all Janias, could not only interpret the purpose of various artifacts that fell from the ancient structures, but also knew how to make them work. And Dema came to understand that Ryma possessed an awareness that seemed to go beyond thought, a capacity to feel so deeply that it penetrated to the essence of Dema's being. Ryma had reached into her and stirred something to life, something Dema did not want to let die, a need, a desire, a passion. But for what exactly, she did not know. All she knew was that she needed Ryma, and Ryma needed her. The Jania's soft yellow eyes, exotic and otherworldly, penetrated the near darkness. She reached over, fingers moving slowly up Dema's body. Dema shivered with anticipation. Ryma's long, thin fingers stopped at the pendant hanging between Dema's breasts. Ryma gripped the pendant and removed the artifact from around Dema's neck. Its reflective surface, smooth and circular, shed sparks as her strange fingers brushed over the falx metal, reading its unseen language as only a Jania knew how. The sparks engaged themselves in an alien dance and coalesced, splinter by splinter, until the outline of a magnificent city grew up from Ryma's palm, Anua, the city of light. Or so Dema had been told. Ryma sighed heavily, and in that moment Dema's own heart seemed overcome with emotion. It was a shared intensity like no other, a desire that threatened to swallow her whole. And although she felt Ryma's yearning, the compulsion for Anua that plagued the minds and souls of the Jania, it was not the desire Dema, at that moment, wanted to partake in. She pushed the fantasy away, as she had done so many times before. We go, Ryma gestured, to Anua. I know. Dema pushed herself up on her elbows, put her hand through the image, and lay her palm over the pendant. The city vanished. Ryma placed the pendant on the nightstand. This is not the first time we've run into difficulty, Ryma, is it? And it won't be the last either. But if we're going to make it, we've got to keep our heads. and stick together. Rama's face was now framed by a painful disquiet. We're safe for the moment, Dema said. Black ships won't land here. Rima remained still and said nothing. Dema reached across the sheets to take her hand, but Rima folded her arms. I'll walk with sharp ears, as always, Dema slid closer to her. If the God Song is about, I'll know. Captain Ogunwe won't gain an advantage over us again. Dema flicked a lock of hair away from Rima's cheek. I promise. I made a mistake then, and it almost cost us. But we've made it this far. Rima turned her whole body away from her and faced the window, eyes fixed out to the darkening sea. How are we doing for time?
We are at 2:30, so if you want to read a little bit more, you are welcome to do so.
Okay, great. I'll skip over to... I'll skip through. Don't want to go through the whole thing in one go, so I'll skip through and start maybe... yeah. I'll start here. Old photographs. This is where the framing device comes into play. The outside narrator who's reading our story with us has now come into the story. I hold the page between my fingers but stop short of turning over. My mind is crowded with competing visions. There are none of the familiar tales here. No stories of brutal executions or a premeditated murder. This story seems smaller, more personal, and the eyewitness accounts somehow complement what I've read thus far. I bookmark my page, pick up Avram's text, and flip to the appendix at the back. Old photographs live there. Rough black and white images, edges tainted yellow. I finger my way through them. Faces slide past me. The eyewitnesses, Tove Gabarek, Captain Meloy, and the woman who called herself Dema Egan. I grow cold, a bitter polar cold, and the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. A scruffy, weather-eaten coat hangs off her shoulders. High, prominent cheekbones. Cracked and calloused lips slightly parted. Her hair wavy and unkempt, dangling just below her ears. And her eyes, they are wide and dull and empty, like the eyes of a corpse. I run my finger along the edges of the photograph. I feel the blood rush in my ears. It has been many years, many long years, but I know it's her. I remember those eyes, that vacant look, and I remember the terrible things she did to me. In the caption below, the author declares this to be the only surviving photograph of Dema Egan, taken at the port medical facilities in Tanpai not long after the Scepter of Night landed there. Dema Egan, mariner, once part of a vast ship and crew, and later a fugitive and lone trader, ragged, destitute, living a hand-to-mouth existence. And the only thing she seemed to covet besides her stolen vessel was Rima. I look back through the pictures, but there is no photograph of the Janea woman. I'm going to move into part 2. This is it. Part 2, the book's divided into 3 parts, and part 2 actually goes back in time a bit, showing us how Dema became who she was, apparently. In the following weeks, Dema had softened her stance toward Captain Meloy. This was no doubt the result of Rima's influence. One morning, Meloy asked for Dema's help. The repairs to his vessel were completed, but he needed to earn enough to cover the remaining charges. To do that, he would have to get out into the sea again. Dema had used her month's wages to pay the dockmaster at Soladin the fee for the use of a run-down schooner called the Moira. She possessed old-fashioned canvas sails instead of sun sails, so battery power would be severely limited. Dema convinced her own captain, Gabarek, to sign as guarantor for the safe return of the ship. Gabarek was cautious but not overly reluctant. Dema had been 16 when Gabarek took her on as part of the Wayfarer's crew. They had sailed together for many years now, and the captain had learned to trust her. The wind had blown steadily for 3 days. The sails were taut overhead, wind straining them to their limits. At noon on the 4th day, she saw the many machines reaching up like giant misshapen flowers. As they drew near, she could make out the cables and walkways stretching between them. They reminded her of climbing ivy. "Take the helm," Meloy said. Dema gripped the wheel as the captain folded the sails away. Rima stood on the bow of the ship and was first to jump over onto the low platform as they came alongside one of the machine stalks. "Take the pole attachment," Miller called, and tossed over a long metallic rod. Rima caught it in one fluid motion, began climbing the stalk to the next platform some 20 meters up. Miller secured the ship to the platform with the mooring lines, tying the vessel up to whatever seemed sturdy, hanging cables, antennae, or any other protrusion. Mooring lines alone would be fine, Gemma thought, as long as the sea stayed calm, but the weather shifted quickly out here, and the dark line of cloud to the northeast made her uneasy. If they had to cut and run, they would need a drift sock to maintain control. "I don't like the look of those clouds," she said. Miller ignored her. "Shall I ready the drogue? The storm's brewing out there." "No." She considered him for a moment. "Captain?" He looked to the horizon, studied it. She realized he always looked over his shoulder to the horizon, as though expecting something other than a storm. "Prepare the nets," he said. They had gone out on several runs, each time bringing back artifacts to sell in the markets of Soladin and across the other islands of Queru. On the last 2 runs, Milloy did not go with them. He had been offered a temporary job in the dockyard and stayed behind. Soon Melee would have enough money to pay for the release of the Wave Rider. Soon he would take Rima away, off again on the quest. And what then? The sun lingered in the west, tinting the sky yellow and orange. Gemma sat on one of the raised platforms high above the ship. She swung her legs over the edge and watched the sea sparkle like silver and gold stars. The weather had not turned. The storm she feared had changed direction, run along the horizon, and now raged somewhere in the east. She looked up to see Rima standing there, the Genia smiling down at her. "You decide," said Rima. "Be with us, yes?" "I want to," she wrestled with her uncertainty. "But how do I tell my captain? Gaberik has been good to me. She saved my life." Rima sank down on her haunches and stroked Emma's arm. "You be with us," she said. "Is good." Emma respected her captain, loved her like an older sister. Gaberik was strong and rarely showed emotion. Gemma had seen her angry, of course, when a crew member got something wrong or did not respond fast enough to a command. But that was different. That was part of leadership, of keeping a disciplined crew. But to join a quest captain? To travel with a Genia, a nomad of the seas? And to what end? She had seen disappointment in Gaberik's eyes only once and knew it would be painful if that look landed upon her. She did not wish to end her service to Gaberik that way. And what of Meloy? He welcomed the additional hands on deck, of course. If he resented her closeness with Rima, felt any bitterness at all, he did not show it. She reached up and took Rima's hand in hers. They linked fingers. The warmth of their skin pressed together soothed her conflicted heart. Rima stretched out her other hand to the reddening west. "Home," she said, then leaned in and brushed her lips gently over Demma's ears and whispered, "Together." Demma woke to the sound of a gunshot. She bolted up, steadied herself, and listened. She dismissed the notion of thunder. She had been at sea long enough to distinguish between the 2 sounds. Soft morning light bled through the opening hatch above. She squinted into the dimly lit cabin. She was alone. A second gunshot. She grabbed her rifle before the sound faded and planted her feet firmly on the floor. She became stone, listening, assessing the situation. She reasoned Rima was on deck. Although she carried a pistol, at Demma's insistence, the sound Demma heard was loud, thick, booming, not the high cracking sound a handgun would make. There, voices, the thudding of boots above. With careful steps, she moved toward the wooden stairs. She took a few deep breaths, steadied her nerves, and rushed up onto the deck, rifle firmly in her hands, heart pounding in her ears. She spun around when her feet hit the deck, pointing the gun in all directions. She was surrounded. There were 7 men. Some leaned against guide ropes, others stood casually, arms folded across their chests. The weapons were not drawn, but she knew it made no difference. She would get one shot off before being gunned down. "Good morning," said a deep voice. "Sorry to wake you so abruptly." Boz was eager to try out his new gun. Can't say I blame him. There's a special thrill in firing a new weapon for the first time. Don't you agree? Demma turned. A tall, broad man stepped forward, rifle in hand. Behind him and just slightly to the right, she could see Rima standing in the prow of the ship, alone, head down. On the port side stood a massive, 4-sailed vessel. She noticed the tall machines were now in the distance. They must have cut the mooring lines of the Moira in the night while she slept. Shall I take that? The man said. He reached forward with his free hand, seized her rifle by the barrel. Reluctantly, Dema loosened her grip and let him take her weapon. He tossed it overboard. You're not the occupant I expected, he said, but you're not an unpleasant sight. Captain Melloway is not here. So he isn't, he said. Pity. I was hoping to catch up with him. We have some business to discuss. No matter. I'll find him. The man looked around. I heard Melloway had been loaned a new ship, courtesy of a visiting patron. Would that be you by any chance? Dema said nothing. The man shook his head, waved a hand about. Bit of an antique, isn't it? What do you want? The man smiled, a wide, toothy smile. I'm Captain Ogunwe. My ship is the Godsong. To whom do I have the pleasure of addressing? She eyed the tall man. Through his smile, she sensed a cold and indifferent heart beating behind his broad chest. Before she could think clearly about her response, her mouth uttered, I am no one. Are you? Ah. He smiled his toothy smile again, then rammed the butt of his rifle into her stomach, sending her crashing to the deck. Then I guess no one got hurt. Laughter. Dema tried to push herself onto her knees. Stay down, said Ogunwe. She did as she was told. While she lay there, she watched some of the men bring up the past day's catch onto the deck. They rifled through the artifacts while the others looked on. Ogunwe took Rima's arm and dragged her over to the pile. Is it here? He said. Rima kept her head down and remained silent. Ogunwe stood with his back to Dema. She knew his arms and hands were moving. She knew he was signing to Rima, but she could not see what he said. But she saw Rima shake her head at him. Did he find it? Said Ogunwe. Did he hide it somewhere? Rima shook her head again. If he did, and you're not telling me, they're not interested in just any artifact, Dema realized. They're looking for something specific. Take her, he said. A man gripped Rima's arm. Check every space on this ship. Wait! Dema got up on one knee. Ogunwe kicked her in the chest, sending her crashing backwards. Please, she uttered between gasps of air. Please. Ogunwe's men ransacked the ship, tossing all the artifacts and any items that were not secured overboard, including everything below deck. Chairs, food, weapons, ammunition, emergency flares, the inflatable life raft, all of it went into the sea. There seems to be nothing here, said Ogunwe. He kicked her 3 more times. Nothing and no one. A man came forward, large jugs of oil in each hand. He emptied the contents into the cargo hold. Ogunwe was handed a torch which he tossed into the open hatch of the hold. They crossed back to the Godsong. When she was able to get up, the Godsong had pulled away and her sun sails were hoisted, catching the morning wind. Black smoke now billowed from the hold of the Moira. Flames roared up. The fire had established itself and was eating away at the old vessel. She stood there for a moment, stricken with fear. She heard herself call out Rima's name. Only the wind and the flames answered. The tall, flower-like machines were not far off. But there were currents between the burning ship and those ancient structures. She just might make it. What other choice did she have? Without a second thought, she launched herself overboard. Is that good?
It is. I think so. It is actually 2:45. So cool. Time flies, huh?
Oh, it does. Yes.
I'm like, and we ended on somebody throwing themselves overboard.
Yeah. What a bad place to end, I suppose.
Right? All right. Well, so we have some questions. And for everybody that's watching at home right now is the time where you guys start entering your name into the comments. And this is, I will then be taking all of the names that everybody has entered. When we're done with the questions, I'll put them on the wheel of win, and then we'll spin to see who wins the free book at the end of the show today. So question number 1, give me just a second to scroll up here and find it. Let's see. When world building, do you make your own nation customs or do you collect from what's already out there?
I think I understand what he's saying. Do I make my own nation's customs or do I collect from what's already out there? Meaning either from other authors or from the world itself in general.
I think go ahead and just, however you interpret that question to be.
Yeah, I think well, you're influenced by everything you know and everything that's had an influence upon you. So it just whatever comes up, I usually just kind of go with it. It has to kind of make sense, obviously. So there need to be customs that sound logical. There needs, and such as with the ships and the sailors here, they have to have a code of conduct. Ports have to have codes of conduct, and so from that point, I guess they have to be more realistic than fantastical.
Right, so that they're relatable. It kind of actually, I had that question sort of builds like I was writing down questions too. So if I can a little bit, the question that I had was, what cultures, if any, influence your writing? And that's I guess that kind of maybe builds on it, right? Like, do the things that you have, where do you draw from for those, if any?
But so yeah, sometimes I will draw from my own culture being Sicilian American. I may draw influences from there. I may draw certain types of like little myths or stories from there and just twist them about a bit. And other times, there's so many things that influence you from what you've read and from what you've seen that sometimes I'm not sure where they come from, to be honest with you.
Yeah, sometimes it's lost in antiquity, right? Why we do a thing or believe a thing or have some sort of adage, right? A little saying. So yeah. That's definitely true. Okay, let's see. Scrolling down here a bit, I have... What genre is the easiest for you to write and is your favorite? Or do you find your favorite in a different one? I don't get the end of that question exactly, but I think the first couple parts are answerable.
Yeah. What's the favorite genre to write in? Well, I would use the blanket term speculative fiction. So whether it's, you've got your different hard science fiction, soft science fiction, fantasy, secondary world fantasy, urban fantasy. Speculative fiction as a whole is the easiest for me to write in. And no matter what I try and write, it usually kind of turns out to be somewhat on the strange or the bizarre. So I don't tend to go towards hard science fiction, although I'd love to write like Alistair Reynolds. I think he's a great space opera writer. But when I write something, it just tends to go off in a strange direction. I'll follow the strange. Maybe weird fiction, maybe.
How do you define weird/strange?
Something that's like it's fantastical and slightly surreal, almost. You've got a lot of the new weird. I'm not necessarily classifying myself as the new weird, like a Jeff Vandermeer.
Okay.
However, you know who Jeff Vandermeer?
I don't.
Oh, Annihilation. He wrote the book Annihilation. It was and made into a movie. He wrote a great series called Ambergris. The book called Finch. It's just really bizarre, strange things happen that are mostly unexplained, but you have to try and put it together.
I guess when I think of somebody who writes weird stuff, but also horror, it's Clive Barker that comes to mind, who has some pretty weird things out there, but also that's like more horror and less science fiction-y. So yeah. I mean, I don't know, to be honest with you, I don't know where I fall in terms of speculative fiction, if I'm a weird writer, if I'm a fantasy writer, but I tend to write what happens to come to me, and it's mostly of a fantasy-ish bent. You could consider it soft science fiction, I suppose. I mean, the world of my novella could be a world out in space somewhere, and I just haven't said it is. But to me, it's secondary world fantasy, but you could say it's soft science fiction. So yeah. So here we have, what do you suppose are the biggest challenges that you face in writing?
Oh, myself.
Yourself?
Myself, because I'm bizarre. I don't, although some people do this, maybe I'm not the only bizarre person, I don't have a plan. I know how a story is going to start. I know how it's going to end, but I let the characters take me there. And they do their own weird things and say their own weird stuff, but that means that I have to constantly go back and edit like mad while I'm writing the story so that it all continues to make sense and I don't get lost in it.
So how do you keep the continuity then without that happening? Do you have beta readers that help you do that? Because that sounds like even as you go back and you edit, even though you do that you still may yet get lost in your own story.
Yeah, well, I'll usually kind of, if I know that it's something that needs not get, that where I'm going to get lost, I may take notes about what I was thinking of and where it was going to go. Because sometimes the ideas will spring to mind and I'll follow those ideas, or a character will do or say something that I didn't expect and I'll follow that. And then that means, of course, I'll note to myself, go back to this page, foreshadow this because you didn't foreshadow it now that they've done something bizarre or said something strange. So I'll usually keep notes to myself, and I will have, it's always important to have beta readers, whether you're a planner or not. So I do have a few trusted people who know what I'm trying to do. It's important to get people who know what you're trying to do.
Right.
Because I've had a few hard science fiction writers read my stuff, and they don't get what I'm trying to do. And so obviously for them, it's one criticism after another, which is fine. But I have a few readers who know what I'm trying to do, a few published authors who know what I'm trying to do. And so I usually send it to them, and they will guide me a bit more efficiently because they know exactly what I'm trying to achieve.
So I think this is a question I've never actually asked anybody before. You're not the first author that I've ever heard that says they, like, sometimes they'll start writing a character, they had a plan, but then the character just sort of decides to go, takes them in a different direction. So I know that there is, that's not totally unheard of. I'm curious though, how do you know when that is happening versus I guess when you're doing it, because you're writing the character, but how do you know when it's kind of some element of the character that is tugging you in a direction versus you just deciding that as the author that this is how it's going to be?
That's a very good question.
And maybe hard to answer, so don't feel bad.
No, that's fine. Usually when a character does something unexpected, if it feels wrong, if I feel like the story's going in a direction that's not going to be, that breaks credibility, I will stop it and pull it back. If it sounds like it's a great addition to the story and that it's actually going to take it in an unexpected direction that may have a good outcome and reach the ending that I have in mind, then I'll go with it. But I usually kind of get it. I usually go by feeling. If I don't, that's why I don't plan very well. I fly by the seat of my pants, because if I plan it, I feel I'm less creative. I feel the spark is kind of like not there. And if I don't believe in what I'm doing, I don't think a reader's going to believe it either. Yes,
I've heard that term before too. I think pants writing is what I've heard them call it. Like fly by the seat of your pants.
I may try again to plot something out and see what happens. I mean, you never know.
Well, it's at least though. It's almost there's a management style that's kind of like that, where you're goal oriented as opposed to detail oriented with how that goal gets got to. So, you have your beginning and kind of your setting, and then you have your goal, and then everything in between. It's kind of cool. It sounds fun because it's almost like you're telling yourself a story along the way as well, right?
Yeah. It makes it fun. It makes it fun and unexpected for me because I get bored easily. And if I'm bored and if I don't believe in it anymore, and if I'm just like, I'm just going to throw it away. I have a stack of stuff from years ago that I never finished because I just got bored with it because I tried to plan too much. And when I let all of that go, when I unlearned all the stuff I learned doing my master's degree, which taught you to be analytical, plan everything, make sure you have proper things in order, sequences in order. When I learned to get rid of all that, and which took a long time, it started to be a bit better for me. But it started to flow a bit more, started to feel more fun. I don't want it to be too much of a work. I enjoy the work, but I don't want it to feel like a grind. I want to actually say, that's hard, but I had fun doing that.
So speaking of so you said earlier before you started reading that you don't have a background in science. What do you have a background in, and how do you fill in the blanks for the sciencey stuff that in order to give it the real sense without being super hard science? Where do you have friends that you tapped for that, or?
Yeah, I have some friends who I tap for that, or I will just put my nose to the grindstone and do good old-fashioned research.
Yep.
I mean, there's one story that I wrote that could probably be properly called science fiction, called Slipping Sideways, which is in this lovely book by Starship Sofa, Everyone, World Without Walls. So it's a wonderful book with a lot of authors in it. The story I've got in here is my most republished story. I always usually get a request or two to reprint that somewhere. And in that story, there's more of a science element to it. I just had to research quantum, basic quantum stuff, not stuff, my head's going to explode otherwise, because I just have a master's degree in literature. That's all, I'm just a book guy.
Yeah.
I like the story. I like the characters. I like when they learn things and change by the end of the story, which characters have to do.
Right.
And I like illusion with an A, illusion and metaphor.
Illusion, yes.
Yeah, and metaphor and symbolism, and I like suggestions that are dropped in. Things that you can think about intellectually, philosophically, I guess.
Yeah.
Not to try and be too intellectual, because you have to have fun reading it.
Sure.
I like that kind of thing. So for me, if I have to look at the science, I'll do good old-fashioned research, and then I'll double-check it with someone. Like when I was writing that story, which an editor asked me for, I checked it with him several times, and because he was more of a scientist, he was able to say, this is actually wrong. Check this out instead. And so I had that guidance.
That is a good thing to have. Let's see, we have, I like this one, this is a fun one. What is the most strange thing you have ever had to research in getting ready to write a story?
Wow.
Or at least that comes to mind, because probably if you've been writing for it, you can't remember every last thing, right?
I know. There's so much stuff that I've researched and then thrown out because the story wasn't working.
If the FBI looked at your Google search history, right?
Okay. I was wrestling with a story that was again a secondary world kind of fantasy-ish story that was just published in Horizons magazine, which is a British magazine that comes out from the British Fantasy Society. And it was originally going along the lines of sort of like types of natural drugs in the natural world. So I was researching natural drugs in the world and what types of chemicals
like
they have,
what they or something.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and so a lot of weird stuff happened there. But then, of course, the story went off in a slightly different direction, and all that got put in the dustbin.
But the next thing you know, you're like, wow, look at all these things that I could just go outside and eat, and woo!
Yeah. Wow, man. My own secondary world right over there.
It's kind of funny how, because everything's so synthetic these days, people don't realize. I mean, even what is it? Aspirin, right?
Yeah.
Came originally from willow bark.
Yeah.
And so it's like where things originally came from, and it's probably stuff right in your backyard that maybe you shouldn't eat, right?
Exactly. And one of the strange things I was researching was and I think it's still a theory. I'm not sure if it's been proven, but the idea of genetic memory, that generations think, like particularly traumatic events that happen to previous generations, can be passed down through the children in your genes, which is why there was a big discussion about it in the children of Holocaust survivors, and how that trauma is can be passed down through their genetically. How does it
manifest? What does it look like if it?
You know what? I don't remember because it was a while ago I read it. But somebody was actually posing a very interesting theory about trauma as a sort of genetic, whether it's in your RNA or DNA or whatever, passed on as a sort of like a genetic memory.
Interesting.
Which could have results. The result, I think, is that those children, although they hadn't experienced that trauma, would have a heightened sense of anxiety and maybe be more cautious about certain things.
Interesting.
That was a very interesting theory.
Well, and it kind of speaks though too to human evolution when it comes to what should you be afraid of, so that you don't get eaten and then all the people die, right? I mean,
yeah.
And, so if you've had like some horrible tribal experience or whatever, that kind of gets into like you you will just have this natural aversion to, you know, large creatures, loud creatures, creatures that have big yellow eyes in the night, you know, or something like that, as like just a sheer survival mechanism that you don't even know you have. We have so many things like that. Well, I thought I had one more question here, and I know I wrote down a couple more questions. Oh, this one, this one is funny, so I'm gonna do it.
All right, do it.
Does writing make you hungry? And if so, what is your favorite brain food?
Whoa. Does writing make me hungry? It can do, but it makes me more thirsty for some strange reason. My favorite brain food, tuna fish and sweet corn.
What? Tuna fish and
tuna fish and sweet corn.
Is that a
mayonnaise
thing?
Mixed in mayonnaise.
What? I mean, it's like I know all of these ingredients, but I have never imagined putting them together. I'll be honest.
Put sweet corn in tuna fish, crack black pepper, lots of mayonnaise. You can make a sandwich with it, or you could just eat it out of the bowl. Either way.
I like all of those things individually, and now, and because there's no cooking involved, I could do that. I am cooking adverse. I mean, if you ever want to live, don't eat don't even let me go near a kitchen when it comes to using kitchen supplies as cooking things, right? If you want me to bake something like a clay pot in the oven, because it's really just kind of a kiln, I can do that. But if you want me to bake you some kind of pasta, lasagna, I don't know, forget it. That's not me. But I could do that because there's like no cooking involved. It's just an assembly of food as opposed to, you know, a making of a new thing.
Exactly.
Is it really like a kind of a British thing or something though? I've literally never heard of that.
I don't know. It might be American. I mean, I spent 6 years also studying African literature in South Africa, so I may even picked it up there. I don't remember when I picked it up.
I kind of want to try it, to be honest. I love to try new things, so
go for it. If you don't like it, blame me.
Okay. Yeah, I'll be that guy. He had a suggestion, and I then just didn't eat it. Oh, like, nah, that's okay. Let's see. I don't feel like I would have to have the need to blame you for anything. It's not going to ruin my day. Okay, so I see Jack and Newt, you guys have your names out there. Last chance, guys, get your names into the comments. I'm adding them to the Wheel of Win right now. And, oops, I can spell. And then let's pull this up here. And we will give it a spin. Now, what are we going to be spinning for today? Is it, because I know that you're far away, so probably an ebook is maybe the best way to go.
I think either one. I think David would be happy to send out a paperback as well.
Oh, okay.
I always prefer paper. My personal opinion, I'll go for paperbacks.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
I like to have the actual book. I do have ebooks, but those I have relatively few of them, all things considered, and mostly those are what I turn to at night if I cannot get out from underneath cats walking on me, because you can read on your illuminated screen whilst under the covers, so I can get all the sides down so the cats can't get in.
Yeah.
And then I can read, because if I have an actual book, they will get in between me and that book somehow.
Well, my cats don't care what you have in your hands. They'll just come into your face.
Yes.
Just come right at you, and I'll be like, whoa.
Yeah. They'll headbutt my books, so my books hit my face. They do all kinds of stuff. Okay, I see a couple more names out there, so let me get those. Oops. This is not right. Let's see. And okay, did I spell that one right? Okay, I did. Okay, so with that said, then I guess we will give our wheel a spin, submit the names, and go. Congratulations, Megan Arms. You are the winner of today's book giveaway. thank you so much. You are actually one of our Patreon patrons, so thank you for being on Patreon. And you guys, just for future reference, if you want to get those extra entries in, you can join our Patreon, join the YouTube channel with the little join button that's there with the subscribe and ring the bell button, or do both, and you can have a maximum of 3 entries per every drawing that we do on this channel. So not just here today, but also when we do them on Fae News as well. So with that said, is there anything that you would like to say before we let you go today?
Yeah, embarrassingly, I think I've mispronounced a few of my characters' names in the book, but hey, I'm horrible with names, but there we go. But I hope you know that people enjoy the book. I mean, it's a wonky narrative structure for such a small book, but strangely it kind of works. And so I hope that when I was jumping around a little bit, you weren't getting confused.
I was not getting confused personally. I actually thought it was quite interesting and sort of a nice break to change it up, right? So you know how sometimes when you go to, maybe you don't know, but when you go to smell a bunch of things and then they suggest you smell coffee because the fragrance of coffee is so different than, like, say, smelling 20 flowers all at the same time. And that way, when you smell, so it's sort of like you're reading, then you have a break, which means when you come back to reading the story again, you kind of have this refreshed feeling, right? So that was kind of how that felt to me in listening to you, and I thought it was fascinating. So
thanks.
I do always like to say at the end of the show, well, we're on Friday, so Handmade Home Shopping coming up this Sunday, and I will see you guys hopefully again at 4 to 5 p.m. Also, if you do go buy a book from Carmelo, please leave a review when you get that. It always helps indie authors, especially to get those reviews. So I like to remind folks of that. And I see we have a comment out here. Oh, yep. Thank you, Newt. Newt says, thank you so much for sharing. So thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Yeah. And with that, then we will bid you a good afternoon. It's probably actually Saturday over there for you. So
Almost.
So enjoy the rest of your weekend then, sir, and thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. It's been wonderful.
Absolutely.
Hello, friends. This is Gone for Hammerhands. Thank you for checking out Fairy Princess Lolly's channel. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like and subscribe button. And if you'd like to support these magical creations, fly over to our Patreon and join the Fairy family. Safe travels.
Why is my voice on here?